Hello and welcome to Spirit inSight. Today we have Paula Lenz. Paula is a shared death experiencer and author of the book Driving into Infinity, Living with My Brother's Spirit, about that experience and her after-death communications with her brother, Don. Welcome, Paula. So happy
Oh,
to have you.
thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm so excited to hear your story with your brother. I just thought we would start off if you just want to talk a little bit about leading up to that experience with him and your relationship and the bond that you had.
Well, my brother Don was 4 years younger than me. I do have a sister who's 10 years younger. But as you can imagine, being the oldest, I was always charged by my mom with looking out for my baby brother out in the neighborhood and that sort of thing. So, my brother and I essentially grew up together. And as I said, I was kind of always looking out for him. So, when this event happened and my brother was no longer with us, I was just completely destroyed. It took a really long time for me to work my way through this. But as you'll see from what I relate about everything, in the end, it is all about, connecting with the oneness, and we all have different lessons in life that can lead us to that moment of understanding. And that's what I would like to try and bring forth to people today.
Thank you so much. And if you could just get into that, how this all came about. Like I know you said he passed away and you were in this state of grief. Uh, if you just want to get into your story of how this kind of unfolded for you and then the experience that you had with him.
Okay, I appreciate that. So basically, let me start out by saying that this year marks 39 years since my brother Don's transition from his earthly life at the age of 26 years old. And I was 30 at the time. And I'm knocking on the door of 70 now. So you can understand that it's been a number of years since this occurred. But in 2017, this is when I retired. I finally decided to share my story with the world, because the things that I relate here, these are not things that I talked about in the ensuing years after his death, which was in 1983. So essentially, I really didn't come out about this information until 2017, a year after I had retired. It just, I was hesitant to talk about that because I was a businesswoman all my life in my career, and I just didn't want people thinking I was crazy or whatever. So being able to be retired, and I decided to write my book called Driving into Infinity, Living with My Brother's Spirit. Once I did that, for the first time in my life since all this occurred, I could suddenly feel authentic as a person, claiming this other side of who I am and my life. And so I want your listeners to know that that is such an important step in a person's life. And it was freeing for me to write the book and to be able to share this story with others. So, as I said, my brother crossed over, he was 26. And as I said, then 2017 is, when I finally shared my story with people. And, as I explain in my book, we are not forgotten by those we have loved, and they do visit us more times than we consciously know. And I hope that my story provides some comfort to those who have experienced the loss of someone they love deeply. So I ask that people sort of travel back in time with me right now, because the year is 1982, and this was a time before the internet was available, before cell phones, personal cell phones were used, and computers were not exactly the norm in most offices back then. I was 29 years old at the time, and I began having this recurring dream. And that started in the fall of 1982. And I had this dream many times until the fall of 1983. And this dream that I had was always the same. I was outside on these wide, expansive fields, and large crowds were gathering there. And someone near me in this dream asked me what was happening. And I replied that I heard it was the end of the world. And everyone was looking up at the sky, and there appeared Jesus. And in that moment, when that happened, in my dream, I doubled over, almost falling down to the ground. And I was experiencing the worst pain of my life, but it wasn't physical pain. It was heartfelt suffering and agony beyond words. And as I doubled over in this dream, I just kept saying, but it isn't supposed to be this way. I thought that the end of the world was supposed to be joyous. And then the dream would end suddenly. I had absolutely no idea what this dream meant and why I had it over and over again. But let's fast forward to the morning of Friday, October the 7th, 1983. And I was driving my husband to a meeting and then to his office that morning. And then suddenly, as I'm driving, I had this very strange, sharp pain in my chest over my heart area. And I remember glancing at the clock to determine how much time we had left to get to our meeting. And it read 9 o'clock, 9 a.m. But I was experiencing fear and alarm as this pain continued in my heart area. I was only 30 years old, but I wondered if I was on my way to a heart attack. Or a blood clot. I just didn't have any idea what was going on. But as I continued driving, eventually the pain began to fade slowly, but I could not forget about it. And I was really kind of frightened by that episode. But I dropped my husband off and I continued on driving to meet friends at the Greek festival, which is held every year in Houston at one of the Greek Orthodox churches. And it was near downtown, and it was a very popular and crowded event. And Michael, my husband then, had planned to join us there after lunch. But sooner than expected, I spotted Michael making his way across this room, this crowded area. And as I smiled and waved at him, when he got closer, I saw his face and I knew that something was terribly wrong. I had never seen him look that way before. And when he caught up with me, he put his hands on my arms and he looked straight into my eyes. And in a trembling voice, he said, Donnie was killed in an accident this morning. Donnie being, of course, my brother. And his face just crumpled as he spoke the words. I mean, he was very good friends with my brother. And when I was told this by him, I had this vision in my mind. I could just see the earth falling, and shattering at my feet. And I just slumped over and toward the ground, just crying and screaming, no, no, no. And my brother's accident had happened while he was driving a company truck, and his time of death was reported as 9 a.m. And this was the same time I had experienced this terrible pain over my heart. So I felt what happened to him at the time of his accident. Now, my feelings over this loss, of course, I was just destroyed. My brother and I had grown up together. My mother had always put me in charge of looking out for my baby brother, making sure nothing happened to him. That's what I did when I was growing up. So um, my grief was just unbearable. And I just didn't know a human being could cry so many tears. Just unbelievable to me. And so I'm going to read just one passage from my book here, but every moment was sheer agony during those days, with no words to adequately describe a broken heart. I barely slept. I moved in a daze. I wanted to die every day. This terrible, impenetrable wall now separated me from ever having contact with my beloved brother again. How do you process that fact and integrate it into your life? I could not. And then at the burial site, I wondered how I could possibly continue living after this. But 3 days after his funeral, Donnie came back to me while I was driving. And at that time, I was driving my brother's personal truck. Um, and I was going to my grandparents' house located just outside of my hometown of Bryan. And I was taking several plants and vases of flowers and things that had, come from the funeral. And I was driving out to see them. And this trip takes about 10 to 15 minutes. So I was halfway there, just driving along. And then suddenly this strange thing began happening to me. I suddenly developed 360-degree vision while I'm driving. I could see everything around me. And as I realized that at that moment, I became aware of someone just behind me on the right side, at my right shoulder. And then I saw that it was my brother Donnie. And I could hear him speaking to me telepathically as I'm driving. And my brother's body, I'll say body, he was in spirit, but he was made up of what I call a series of light points. And it reminded me of people being transported on the old show Star Trek. That's kind of what it looked like. But I knew that it was him. And he told me not to be sad, that he was happy. And most of all, he wanted me to know what life was like for him now a little bit. And he explained to me that he was now on another plane of being, and that it had simply been time for him to go. And at this point, I became aware that I was no longer in my body, but existed only in like a state of consciousness. That's the only way I can describe it. And I was no longer aware of driving at all. And for very briefly, I sort of saw this landscape, which just kind of looked like some outlines of some trees and countryside, but nothing that I really recognized. But after that, my entire focus became experiencing infinity and eternity. And throughout this experience, my brother stayed with me the whole time. And I felt that, with no body restricting me any longer, I felt that I was completely one with the universe. And the universe for me looked exactly like what you see on the background here. That's what I saw being out in the middle of the universe. And as I reached that stage of feeling that I was one with the universe, I was experiencing that I was totally one with peace, with love, and all knowledge. And not only did I know these things, but I was totally one with all of these things. And actually the phrase that came to me during that was the peace that passeth understanding. But I wasn't just thinking about these things. I actually had become all of these things. And I knew that everything and everyone is one with the Spirit, this love. That is what we all are. That's what I became, and that's what I experienced, and being one with this all-knowing consciousness. And I understood, as I said, that there was just no separateness from Spirit, that we're all one. It was just an incredible feeling that can, it's, in my opinion, it's impossible to understand or recreate that feeling that I was having being out in the universe with my brother and being the oneness. But I understood from that, as I said, that everything and everyone is connected throughout the universe. And that's what people living in our bodies on earth, that's what we don't get. Because we're so enclosed in this body. We have a brain, we have events going on around us. But none of that sort of thing came into play in terms of what I was experiencing. And, I loved being in this state of consciousness. There was nothing about that made me want to go back to earth. It was like I was loving this freedom, and I just didn't care anything about my life, my body, anything back there. And it felt like this was the natural state of being for me, and really what it is for everyone who comes into this life, into this body. But of course, because we're encased in a body, it's so much harder for us to understand or even feel that. So I feel like that my brother communicated more information to me, but it's almost like I wasn't allowed to remember all that. And I remember I was 30 then. I'm almost 70 now. So I'm sure there are things that have transpired in my life that probably I was told by him, but I can't swear to that. But it's just the feeling I get. But as I'm with my brother, just out in the middle of the universe, I really wanted to go deeper into this experience, because I can tell you one thing, I didn't care anything about being back in my body. But as I desired to stay here, stay in this feeling, I suddenly began whooshing away really rapidly. I could hear this rushing sound almost. And when that started to happen, because essentially that was the point at which I had decided I was going on to the next level. I was going to leave this picture of the universe behind, and I was going to heaven or to experience whatever the next phase was beyond where I was. And so, as I said, I could feel this rushing sound and movement. I was just moving very rapidly away, but within an instant of that happening, I felt my brother's energy. It's the only way I can describe it, or spirit, pushing on my spirit. It's really hard to describe what this is like, because just being in this sense of energy and not really encased in a body, it's hard to describe. But he began using his energy to push me back down. And he said, "No, you can't go yet. It's not your time." And so when he conveyed that to me, um, sort of like it felt like with the feeling of a thud, I landed back in my body. And in fact, I could see myself. I was still driving his truck, but I had actually made a turn onto the road that led directly to my grandparents' house. And I could see myself driving, and I could see myself coming back down through the roof of the truck. And I landed, that's how it felt. I landed back in my body. And I was then, physically back in my body driving. And I was not that far from my grandparents' house. And the miracle of that was that even after I got back in my body, for the rest of that day, I just felt so peaceful and so happy. And I just felt all was well in the scheme of life and living, with my brother, with me, with everything. But unfortunately, that that only lasted for the rest of that day. And the the thing about that too was, when I got to my grandparents' house, I because I was in such a different state of mind about understanding the idea of death and all of that, I could see so clearly how my brother must must have been viewing us being in our sorrow, um, just completely disconnected from um, life and love and living, because Donnie was gone. And so I experienced all that. Continued for the rest of that day to be in a place of peace and complete understanding, and feeling that oneness. So that lasted for the rest of that day. But the next day, when I woke up, I was just back in the state of complete devastating grief, even though I'd had this experience. Because I guess because I came back into my human sense and human feelings, and my brother was never going to be in this life with me again physically. It was just overwhelming again. But obviously, this was not an experience that I've ever forgotten, and even how it felt. Um, and it really changed my consciousness in many ways. um, and I continued to have after death communications and other kinds of outreach from my brother, really for the rest of my life. And um, for example, in the house that my husband and I lived in, my brother had stayed with us one summer. And so he had lived with us in this house we were in. And, one day I was walking out of the bedroom, and I glanced into the living room, and for an instant, I could see him in the living room. And he wasn't looking at me or anything. He was actually over at our stereo cabinet, and he was actually looking in there for an instant. I saw that, which is something that he did when he lived with us that one summer. But I can assure you that I was completely shocked, and I thought, oh my God, I'm hallucinating or something. But it was him. And um, also, we had a separate dining room. And when my brother Donnie lived with us that one summer, well, he and my husband at night, even though we all had to go to work the next day, they would get in there and they would start playing this crazy football game, electric football game. And my brother always sat in this one particular chair. And when I would come home from work and I would pass by the dining room, I would see that chair pulled out from the table. And I even asked my husband at that time, I said, "Are you coming in here and doing any work at the table?" And he's like, "No, I hardly ever go in there," which neither of us hardly ever went in there. And, but until we sold that house a couple of years later, from time to time, I would find that one chair pulled out from the table. And um, another thing that happened was I came home from work one day, and actually, my husband at that time was out in California. He was staying out there for a work project. So there was no one else in the house. But I came home one day, as I said, from work. And when I went to go into the hallway where our bedroom is, the first thing I see is a chair placed in the um, middle of the doorway that took you into our bedroom. A chair that was, it was a chair that was supposed to be at the desk that was in our bedroom. And I just stopped short. I thought someone was in the house. And I got really scared. I ran out the front door and I stayed out in the yard for quite a while, but nothing happened. So I finally got enough nerve to go back in the house, and I moved the chair. I looked around the whole house and nothing was amiss. There was no one there. I checked closets and everything. I could only imagine that it was my brother doing this again, using his energy. And another time when I came home, I turned down that same hallway, and there was a book that was lying against the opposite wall there. And I thought, what is that? And there was across from that book lying there was a small built-in bookcase area. And I could see where this book had been. It was on the bottommost shelf, which was at the floor level, at carpet level. And you could see where this book had come out from. And when I picked up the book and looked at it, it was this old leftover book from an encyclopedia set that my husband had. And it was the volume D, which of course my brother's name was Don. And it was on the opposite side of the hallway. And you could tell it had flown out from the bottom shelf. So that was another instance of something happening. Also, now this one involved both my husband and I. I wasn't just by myself on something. And again, it was in the same house. And we had a back room there that we used as the TV room. And there were these two really tall bookcases in there. So one evening we're sitting there watching TV. And all of a sudden, from again, the very topmost shelf of one of these bookcases, this book came flying out across the room and dropped at my husband's feet, past me. And he saw it too. So it wasn't just me. And we both looked at each other like, what in the world just happened here? And so, there were just any number of things. I mean, even through the years, even now, I still have things that happen. In fact, not very long ago in this very office that I'm sitting in here at my house, again, I have one of these tall bookcase. Actually, I have two tall bookcases in here. And I'm sitting facing the computer like I am now. And, again, the bookcases are across from my desk. So I'm not, facing them. And all of a sudden, this book comes flying out of the bookcase, the topmost shelf, not toward me, which is the way the bookcase faces, but it went flying toward the window over here. And it didn't just come out and fall down to the ground. No, it didn't do that. And I jumped about 2 feet out of my chair because I was deep in thought looking at my computer. And so I jumped up and I looked toward the bookcase and I said, Donnie, cut it out. I know that's you. Because that's how he and I were playing tricks and stuff on each other. So it still happens. People ask me that. Well, do you still have things that happen? Well, yes, here and there, but not all that often now. And so the other thing is, I believe that having had this out into the universe experience in my life, I feel like I have, I don't know if you call it extra powers, or I have really good intuition or a sense of what's happening, or maybe messages are given to me. But I know that not too long after my brother's death, my husband and I were staying at my parents' house in Bryan, where we were all from and where my brother lived. And when we went to bed that night, I knew that something was wrong in that house because both my dad and his wife that day and the day before, actually before we had arrived, they had gotten sick and they were still under the weather while we were there. Well, then after a day or so of being at their house, both my husband and I started getting sick. And so when we went to bed that night, we were already under the weather, not feeling well. But I knew that there was something wrong in that house. And I didn't know quite what it was because my brain was real foggy from this carbon monoxide poisoning we were experiencing and didn't know it. But I managed to get out of bed, crawl down the hall to where where my parents had this phone there in the hallway. And I called my sister, who lived not very far away, and I could just barely get to the phone and everything. But I told her, I said, there's something wrong in this house. I need you to come over. So she did drive over, even though we were already in bed and everything, but it was still early. And I told her, I said, we need to open the front door and we need to open the kitchen window. I said, there's something wrong in this house. I said, I don't know what, but that's what we need to do. And so she did. She ended up sleeping the night on the couch, and then she helped me back to bed. But the next day, I told my dad again. I said, "There's something wrong in this house." So he decided to check the furnace, and lo and behold, this door, this small door on the furnace, had fallen off. And so that meant that the furnace, because of that, it was taking all the oxygen out of the air in the house using it. And my dad found that and he put that door back on. Then he understood why we had all been getting sick, because we were having carbon monoxide poisoning. And I'm telling you, that's what happened. So essentially, I saved our lives. I mean, not me, but through the intuitive information that was coming through to me. So, I've had many different kinds of experiences. If I'm out walking through the neighborhood at night, I apparently have some kind of electromagnetic aura or something, because when I walk past street lights, they go out. And then when I walk on, they come back on. So it's been quite a journey in terms of the things that I've experienced through the years. And, but again, this was not something I talked with to people until I retired, like I said, in 2016. And then I just said, well, this is who I am. This is what I've experienced. This is what I know to be the truth. And then I wrote my story. But I would like to just relate one other example of some of the things that happened. And of course, this was years later from my brother's death. But at one of my jobs that I had, I had hired this lady to do work for us, work at our company there. And one day she walked into my office and sat down, and we were just talking about some work stuff. And all of a sudden, I saw around her develop this gigantic purple aura. And she's sitting there talking, and I'm seeing that this has happened. And I'm just sitting there with my mouth open, trying to figure out what is happening here. And so knowing her well enough that, I could tell her this, I told her what I was seeing. I said, you've got this gigantic purple aura around you. And anyway, long story short, she ended up becoming a healer. And she left the world of business and went into her own business, helping people with these healing powers that she had. But I saw her the day she came into her powers. So, and there's a lot more incidents like that I describe in my book. But that was one of the more amazing things that I had happen, for sure. But at the end here, I just I want to relate this meditation, Buddha meditation for people to take with them. And it's, may I be at peace. May my heart remain open. May I awaken to the light of my own true nature. May I be healed. May we be a source of healing for each other. And I just love that. And the other thing I would like to offer to people is I have what's called the meld into spirit technique. And that is a technique that's really meant to be done with your eyes open, like you can do it anywhere. And, even if you're just walking around, I don't advocate doing it while you're driving, of course, if you're doing something like that. But it's just a way. I mean, it's on my website and people can go there and find it. But it's a way, like I said, of just with your eyes open, consciously letting go of all the things that are clinging to you, muddling your mind or whatever. And it enables you to let go of things and kind of look around you and almost like making everything blend and blur together and seeing everything around you as the energy of spirit and just being one with that. And so being the oneness is what I call that. And I hope that it helps people.
I'm sure it will. Did you want to guide us through that?
Sure. Let's see. I just need to get to the right page here. Yeah, let me find that here. Let's see. Oh, here it is. Okay. So here's the visualization for the meld into spirit technique. And just ask everybody, just kind of relax. You can do this with your eyes open or closed, but now in your mind's eye, imagine and see everything around you blurring and blending together. There are no more edges to anything. Everything is becoming all the same white particles of light floating and merging. Now imagine the light expanding out beyond Earth, further and further out into the entire infinite universe, encompassing all. Everything becomes the light and on out into infinity. And as this process continues, feel how easy it is to let go of all judgment, of people, of issues, of life. It all falls away, released easily and completely. When we feel through our heart completely free, then we easily experience being one with the universal consciousness of spirit, of the all that is. Just relax into that supportive, loving feeling. There's no separation of anything. You are safe. You are loved. Left behind are any human earthly worries. Again, that's meld into spirit technique, and you can find that on my website, which is www.paulalenz.author.com.
That is beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with our audience. That is wonderful. And I love how you talk from that heart space and that oneness, because that's very much what I came back with too, as far as once you've been with that oneness, it's indescribable, but yet you feel that. Now, I was just curious, 'cause after hearing your story, your brother Donnie, has he had any other communication, or has it been more just knowings and, him showing off his new skills of moving things? It seems he likes books a lot.
Yeah. Um, well, you know, um, I, as I said, I do have moments when I feel him around, especially here in my home office. Um, it's especially when it's quiet, like, I described that one incident. And I do know that he is around from time to time. But, as I've told people, um, it's not like he's an earthbound spirit. He can come and go, and and all is well. He still actually has, I'll say, I feel he still has, the characteristics of my brother, who he was. And so that's always kind of, I'll say, comforting to me to be able to feel that energy of his, and, just to be able to experience that from time to time. And yeah.
I'm sure you get asked this a lot, but how would you describe to anyone seeking, their own kind of validation from their loved ones? How would you say, to be more open to that for their own?
Well, you know, there's nothing wrong with um, taking some moments away from your busy life, sitting down and just closing your eyes and going into a state of calmness, and asking that person to perhaps give you a sign that they're around every now and again, or maybe it's a message that you can hear from them. Um, you know, in fact, I think it's a good thing to be able to do that every now and again, because there can be connection there, but you have to have the openness about that and get into that place of quietness and calmness and connectedness, I'll say, with spirit, and trying to be that oneness. um, it's not always an easy thing to do, to reach that state. Even though I've had these experiences, there are some times when it's harder than other times. um, and I'm sure that's just a factor of the things we have going on in our lives. It's like, oh well, I want to connect, but you know it, then other things come into play in your mind or whatever. Sometimes it's just easier to do it maybe when you're out in nature, um, and you don't even have to have your eyes closed. You can just be walking around being calm and noticing how beautiful everything is, and just letting go of other things. And those moments of asking for maybe a sign, or hearing something from someone who's crossed over, you're more in a state of openness, I'll say.
Did you find the more you leaned into that communication, the more that you received?
Yes, definitely. And I'm totally comfortable with the moments where something happens, and I know it's him. And it's not scary. I mean, people need to kind of get that out of their heads. If you've loved someone, they've crossed over, and um, you know, what does it hurt to try to reach out and see if they have something uh, that they want to share with you? I mean, it's all energy, it's consciousness, and um, we just have to be able to be in a state where it's more open in relation to that. Yeah.
I feel, it's that openness, like a different type of communication, but I always say, just communicate like they're here. Like, do you often like just talk to him to feel that energy?
Yeah. I mean, uh, there's nothing there's nothing strange or whatever that needs to be done. It's just, this is someone you know and loved and were with, um and yes, they're on the other side, they're in spirit or whatever, but those elements of who they were, uh, I believe anyway, and feel like that some of those elements survive and are there. And if and of course my brother was an easy guy to know, and he was so well loved by all of his friends, and of course his family. He was never a person to be mean. He was funny, and just someone you could easily connect with. Now, if you have someone that you're trying to connect with that's maybe not quite that lighthearted, or whatever, maybe it takes a little more. But if you're familiar with that person and you had interaction with them, go to that space in your mind, your consciousness, remembering who they were and how they were, as though they're standing in front of you. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I find even like when I want to connect, even with like that source energy from my death experiences, if you go to that heart space and you try to feel that energy, it brings it back alive.
Yes.
That's what
And
you say.
you're exactly right. What you're saying right there. It just takes a little time that you have to sit down and um, make space for that. Life is, well, I'm a real active person anyway. And so, it's like I tell myself, you need to remember and sit down and just have some quiet time, yourself. And so once in a while I do get around to doing that here in my office. But I even do that if I'm out bike riding through the neighborhood. That offers me a space where I'm not inhibited by the surroundings of the house, paperwork to be done, whatever. And I'm a person, I've been riding bicycles since I was old enough to ride a bicycle. And my whole life, I've continued to ride. And the reason I've done that is because it's always offered me, um, that openness to just be at peace and think about nature and not be all involved in, oh, well, I need to do this. I mean, even when you're young, you've got things placed on you you're supposed to be doing and this and that. And it just takes really stepping away from that consciously.
Mhm.
Even if you're going to go for a walk in a park or something, you have to really consciously um, not think about those things that need to be done at the house or whatever. It's
So
really just about immersing yourself in the nature scene around you, or just even looking at the sky.
mhm.
Sky and clouds and things can help release you from what's going on here in your life. And that's just something that we as people do not take enough time to do. And it's not even about a vacation or whatever. It's really about you going out somewhere, a park or wherever you can just have some alone time, I would say, and be okay with that. And just take time to consciously open up yourself to the fact that, I want to connect with this particular person. I want to let them know how I'm feeling or whatever. And just do that and see what happens. And I I think it's not only good for the physical body, it's good for the soul to, I think, be able to take some time away from all that and try something like that. Try to connect. And some people do that for prayer, of course, and connecting with spirit and the
Yes.
oneness. And that opens up things for us too. Yeah.
I think a lot of it is, we're such a society centered on doing instead of just being.
Yeah. I know that feeling. That's the way I am. If I don't have something I'm doing, I start going, my God, what am I going to do?
Yeah, like slowing those mind processes, and finding that mindfulness, like you said, to detach from it all, or just see the beauty in the flow rather than doing like my mom's after death communication was, to find that joy. For me, she said I need to start dancing again. But I mean, like, I think the moment of joy, like how you bike ride, you you your body's busy doing something, so your mind can just that it enjoys, your mind floats off instead of creating all these thought processes. I mean,
Exactly.
when you're biking, do you find that you just kind of escape, like your mind goes somewhere else?
Absolutely. And, like I said, I've been riding my bike since I was quite little, 4 or 5. And I have never given up having a bike to ride my whole life. And like I said, I'm going to be 70 this year. And I've been riding a long time. And, in all kinds of situations that I experienced in my life, whether I was in high school or I was younger or I was working, getting on that bike and riding, it was like just poof, letting it go out of the top of my head into the sky and just being free of that and just letting the natural surroundings just wash all that away. Just get back to who you are, spirit, and enjoying uh, what's around you in terms of nature or whatever. I can't live without a bike. I mean, I've been with a bike so long, and that is my escape. And it opens the way for just easily letting go of all this stuff around us. It's like I'm on my bike, I'm going to do a bike ride. all this stuff can wait. It's back at the house. It'll still be there. And that's just the way it's always been for me. I'm sure other people have other ways of dealing with that. Maybe they go work out, maybe who knows what, maybe they go for a hike. Um, but I think that everyone needs to have something that they consider the way out of uh, anxieties, overthinking things, just, uh, you know, something that helps them shed all of that so that you're just kind of like free. That's what bike riding does for me. It frees me from all that stuff.
Mhm.
And, you know,
It's just
so
a state of being. Yeah.
exactly. You're so right.
Yeah. And I find in those moments, like you said, that's when you feel your loved ones. And I don't feel like take enough time. I once heard someone say we're supposed to take 2 hours of that a day, that to be in our own energy, just to sit within ourselves. And I'm thinking, I don't know one person that actually does that, you know? I mean, we're lucky if we get 5 minutes, but 5 minutes is still important for that recharge, I think.
Well,
But
it is. That's the thing. Well, that's the other thing too about bike riding. You get on your bike, you ride away from the house, you're riding in the midst of who knows what, a park or along a river or, you know, and so you're immediately taken out of the environment where you're like, oh gosh, I got to do this. Oh, I need to do this. Oh, I'm behind on that. I mean, then we all do that. and and it's just important, whatever your space that it feels good for developing for yourself, that's where you need to go every now and again, more times than not. And then when you're in that private kind of space, it's so much easier than uh, to feel that you really can be connected with that spirit, that freeness, and man, we all need that. Sometimes I just like to imagine I'm out in the universe, like this picture behind me, just out there. And
it's great visualization. Before we wrap it up, I just want to ask you, like, through all your experiences and your transformative events, what would you say is the thing you want to impart the most to people, like for them to take away with and just has changed you?
well, I would say that the thing I want people to take away is number one, um, our that our loved ones can still be around, but it doesn't mean they hang out here all the time. But there's nothing wrong with asking, um, or perhaps them to give you a sign that they're here some way. And because we're human beings in this body and this consciousness, those kinds of things are important to who we are as people. And I believe that you can ask for a sign or something. And then once you see that sign, then believe it and know that your loved ones are still alive. They're just in a different format, I say. Um, and take that with peace, and just say, all is well. And the other thing we forget as human beings is we're not always going to be in this state of being a human being. This will come to an end. And it's not like you want to hurry to the end. You need to enjoy your life. But you know what? One day we're going to be on the other side and we're going to be spirit with them. And that's just the way it is. It's not like, yes, we hurt in this life when they're not with us anymore in this state of being. But guess what? We're going to be on the other side too one of these days. And we're not going to be having to experience over and over again, um, this separateness from those we love. Because even when they connect with you or give you signs, um, I mean, for me, the worst thing after he died for me was like, I'm never going to see my brother again in person and have all these funny, crazy human times together. But I have to take what I can have while I'm in this life. And that means connecting with him in a different way than we did when he was living. And I think that's an important thing to remember. We're not always going to be in this state of being. We're not always going to be in this state of separation from them. But in the meantime, try to open to some kind of connection and at least accept that when it happens and feel joy about that. I just think that's really important. But,
Thank you.
again, I just say, I'm just like everybody else. When somebody like my brother is not here in this physical space with me, yeah, I still have times that I'm pretty sad. But it's not going to be forever. And do what you can do while you're in this particular phase of being, I say.
Yeah, everything's temporary. That's it. Oh, that's a beautiful message, Paula. And thank you so much for being with us today. I think that will really be impactful for those that are trying to communicate or have gone through this process, and the understanding that, we don't die, we just change form. And that's such a beautiful message. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank you,
again.
everyone, for joining us. Have a very blessed day.